views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Happy New Year. How are you, everybody? Hope you're feeling good. Hope everything is well. I'm your host, Dr. Bob Lee. Welcome to Open BXRX. Coming up on today's show, it's another good one. We'll take a look back at how the pandemic has drastically impacted the lives of many people in our communities. Then, we'll reflect on how some organizations aided the fight for social and racial equality in the Black Lives Matter movement. Plus, we'll take a look back at what some might consider the most important election of our lives and how early voting impacted that race. After that, Bobby C. will highlight most important moments in the world of sports. And then we'll highlight a group of nurses. They came together to provide support for fellow frontline workers during the peak of the pandemic. All this and more headed your way. Stay tuned. We're open. Everybody, I'm your host, Dr. Bob Lee, and you're watching Open. It's a live interactive program that brings the Bronx and New York City straight to your TV set. You can stay connected to us through social media at BronxNet TV. Leading things off, we'll take a moment to revisit conversations with Dr. Michael Tugetman, Medical Director at AFC Urgent Care Throgs, and Zach Hennessey. He's the Vice President of Neighborhood Health at Public Health Solutions. They spoke about the impact of the pandemic on our communities, and they want to highlight ways in which we can protect ourselves, protect our families, and protect our communities. Okay. What other services do you provide, Don?
Well, we are doing COVID testing. We are doing the nasal swab for the virus, and we are doing the blood test for the antibodies. I would say right now, somewhere in the area, 50% of our patients are coming in for COVID testing. We do keep them separate. We keep them in a separate area just to protect other patients that may just be coming in for a sprained ankle or whatever. But now that we're getting into phase 4, we are actually able to provide a lot of our typical services. And these include, if you'll allow me, cold, sore throat, sinus infections, ear infections, allergies, pneumonia, bronchitis, allergic reactions, headaches, back pain, abdominal pain, urinary tract infections, women's health issues, and testing and treatment for sexually transmitted infections. Yeah. We also have a fully equipped X-ray service for sprains, contusions, fractures. We have a procedure room. We're looking at abscesses, burns, foreign body removal.
What safety measures will people need to follow when they come in? Of course, you know, I went to a dentist and they hit me with the meter, got my temperature, and they made me wash my hands again and put on gloves.
Right. Well, we're checking their temperature when they come to the clinic. We're also making sure that they have a mask, that they keep social distance. We allow only a certain amount of people in the waiting room, and it has to go according to social distancing. And the rest of the people have to, unfortunately, wait outside. But as we make room in the waiting room, we have them come in. That hasn't been too much of a problem. Basically, you know, it's very important to follow science and our faith. Our governor, our mayor, they've been asking for us to continue to do what we have succeeded. New York has been excellent as far as following protocol established by the politicians, and the Bronx specifically, which is a very hard-hit area, has really done a great job protecting itself. So you really have to just, you have to care. We have to care about ourselves, but especially our loved ones, our friends, our neighbors. Here in the Bronx, where I've lived all my life, with no exception, we reach out to each other, and we're doing that now more than ever.
Tell us more about the survey.
So we conducted a survey with 1,000 New Yorkers, and what we found, it was a telephonic survey, and what we found was that the lowest income people who participated, those who reported receiving government benefits like SNAP and WIC, were more likely than others to have missed needed preventative health care, like regular physicals, in-person medical visits, prenatal care, and even vaccinations for their children. So, for example, 45% of these respondents, these lowest income respondents, missed a regular physical versus 33% of others. And 5% missed a vaccination for their children versus 1% of others. So this will likely have long-term health consequences and contribute further to the health disparities that we see here in New York City.
Yeah. Can you describe the pandemic's impact on New Yorkers beyond the virus?
So we asked about COVID-19 specifically and how that was impacting them and what kind of COVID-19 care, testing and care they had gotten. And again, we saw, we compared wealthy and low income respondents, and we saw that a much smaller proportion of low income respondents had received any type of COVID-19 care, whether that was testing or treatment. Again, when it came to testing and treatment, something like 57% of wealthy respondents had received some type of treatment versus 36% of low-income respondents.
So they're not going to get checked or tested because of the low income? How does that pan out?
No, this isn't causal, but it has to do with what we know about how the pandemic affects people's lives, how many people have to continue showing up at a place of work versus how many people are working at home, how many people are juggling multiple needs related to their benefits, how many people have lost their jobs. So oftentimes when, and I'm sure you can relate to this, you have priorities in your life, right? And sometimes health isn't at the top of the list. Your kids might be at the top of the list. Your job might be at the top of the list. And so these things are affecting access. And what it means to have health equity is to make increased access where you see people have less access and remove barriers to access. So that's what we're hoping to do as a result of this survey.
We'll take a quick break right here, but we'll be right back with more Open next.
Right to Counsel NYC Coalition held a virtual tenant town hall, inviting the community to discuss rent cancellations and other tenant questions and concerns during COVID-19.
The Right to Counsel is basically a citywide tenant organizing coalition that fought for and won low-income New Yorkers to have the right to a lawyer should they face an eviction. Right. And it's not just about ensuring that tenants have attorneys, but also about building tenant power and about fighting to reclaiming our home.
Along with Housing Justice for All, Right to Counsel won a historic eviction moratorium for all tenants in New York State, meaning no one living in the state can be evicted until at least June 20th.
We put pressure on both the mayor and the governor, and it worked. Less than 1 week later, we won an eviction moratorium. Landlords can't sue you while this moratorium is in effect. It means that housing courts in New York are closed except for emergency repairs and illegal lockouts. And it means that there are no evictions, period, until at least June 20th.
They're now organizing a campaign to urge Governor Cuomo to #cancel rent. The demands also call for rent freezings and ask for the investment of $10 billion in homes to house the homeless.
He has the power and we are demanding that he cancel rent. What does that mean? It means rent, mortgages, and utility payments that are owed or accumulated during the length of this crisis should just be canceled.
If you missed the live town hall, you can check out a recap on Right to Counsel's Facebook page. To see the petition and call to actions for these movements, visit righttocounselnyc.org. Reporting for BronxNet, Sanji Lopez.
Welcome back. You know, this year, the Black Lives Matter movement has shed light on the racial and social injustices throughout our nation. We spoke to Nicole Lewis. She's a staff writer at the Marshall Project, and Nada Carter, the executive director of the WESPAC Foundation, on how their organizations are doing their part to promote criminal justice reform and racial equality.
So the Marshall Project was founded in 2014 with the central idea that the criminal justice system was broken, that it needed to be reformed, and that the first step often on that process is just having factual, accurate information about all the different ways that it goes wrong, that things break down. And so that was the vision, to create and sustain a sense of urgency about criminal justice in this country. And We Are Witness was a project basically designed to tell and explain and show the human cost of the criminal justice system. So often we hear all these numbers and statistics when we talk about criminal justice and incarceration. There are 2.2 million people locked up, 1 million people in jails across the country, $80 billion a year being spent on prison, people in cages, but that's only like a small part of the story. And so We Are Witness, started with this premise that there are millions of Americans
affected by the prison system.
That's right, who have contact, either direct contact, they're incarcerated, they work in the system, or they have family members, they're judges, right? The actual total universe is much, much bigger. And so we wanted to hear their stories.
When we talk about defunding the police department, what does that actually mean?
Sure. So I wrote about this for the Marshall Project, and in the course of my reporting, I thought this one sort of phrase really stood out to me, and it was that abolition is the goal and defund is the strategy. I thought that was really smart. And so often when what I saw was that a lot of people were confused. Okay, defund the police, what does that mean? Why would we do that, right? Who's going to keep us safe? And many of the people who are supporting this movement basically make this argument to say the police actually don't keep us safe. And for Black and brown people, in many instances, they are causing harm, right? So we're thinking of, George Floyd and, Rayshon Brooks, who we were just talking about, right? That these little moments, tiny little incidents where you're using a counterfeit bill or, you're driving drunk, end in a fatality, end in someone being killed. And so they're asking this question of, why do we spend so much money every year to uphold and support this method of policing, this system that actually causes harm in certain communities, when we could be taking that money, right? In New York, for example, where I'm from, we spend about $6 billion each year on the NYPD. And so organizers and activists there are saying, let's take some of that money and transfer it into community services and community programs that address what they see as some of the root causes of crime, of violence, of harm. that they want, mayors and governors right across the country to be thinking about how do you end racism, eliminate oppression, create economic opportunity for all people. How do we use that money from the defunding to divert it to some of these programs? And so that's really what this sort of vision or this push, I think, is all about.
Now, your organization also works with BLM, Black Lives Matter. Tell us about it.
We definitely support the movement for Black Lives. From the very beginning, when I started at WESPAC, it became clear that a big part of social justice work in the United States must be addressing systemic and institutional racism and anti-Blackness that permeates institutions in the United States. And WESPAC latched on to the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them. They're one of the leading institutes in the United States that offer trainings on undoing racism, trying to understand what is racism, developing a common vocabulary that we use to talk about racism, and then thinking through strategies to overcome racism. And really what that means is looking at the outcomes for Black people in the United States, looking at graduation rates, looking at maternal mortality rates, infant mortality rates, looking at who's being locked up in the prison system in the United States, looking at access to employment and decent housing, and all these areas that are essential for a decent way of life. And asking ourselves, why is it that when we look at this social economic data, Black people are not enjoying life as much as white folk are in the United States? And that has to change. And so our whole work is towards racial equity in all these different systems.
Yeah. And what are some of the things that we can do to begin to make that change?
Well, it's not easy work. What we're doing in Westchester County is I'm part of the leadership of the Anti-Racist Alliance, and we're in conversation with county government and local municipal governments to get them to join the GARE, G-A-R-E, and that's the Governmental Alliance for Racial Equity. And it's basically making a commitment that public tax dollars will be used in a way that's moving our society towards racial equity, in a way that's moving school systems to benefit all children, including Black children, so that we do not see the discrepancies in graduation rates. We do not see discrepancies in school disciplinary matters. So it's well known that Black youth are punished and disciplined more severely for engaging in similar activity that white youth do in schools. And this is not correct. So just bringing all these issues to light and talking about them, meeting with stakeholders, meeting with administrators, superintendents, municipal leaders, county officials, and then looking at data, because that's really what the work is about. So when we see progress being made in data, then we know that we're making progress in our work. And if we're not seeing progress, we have to go back and say, what's going on here? What's not working? What's the root cause, doing a root cause analysis? And how do we do what we're doing differently to have different outcomes? Because if we keep doing what we're doing, we're going to be getting the same outcomes.
We'll take a quick break right here, but we'll be right back with more Open next.
On the federal level, we need to make sure that mortgages and rent are completely taken care of so that there is no excuse for a person being removed from their home.
With hashtags like Cancel Rent and Can't Pay May, District 14's Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez held a virtual conversation with more than 2,000 viewers to call for a moratorium on rent and mortgage payments.
It's not that it's impossible to do, and it's not that we can't do it. It's that we lack enough politicians with the political will to actually help people who are tenants and to actually help people who are mom and pop landlords.
AOC went on to suggest a plan to tackle this ongoing issue, one she says is not the only feasible option.
One way that we can cancel rent is to suspend mortgage payments for the cancellation period. Let's say we want to start with 3 months. Suspend mortgage payments for 3 months. Tack that on to the end of the repayment period. So let's say you have a 10-year mortgage, just suspend it for 3 months and make it a 10-year and 3-month mortgage so that you just make 3 additional payments at the very end.
Frequently forgotten, NYCHA residents are experiencing housing issues that are constantly being overlooked. NYCHA organizer Jasmine Sanchez weighs in.
And while NYCHA states that they are communicating with residents, they are using methods that don't apply to all of the NYCHA residents. There are 600,000 of us, and using Twitter isn't going to reach everyone. This year, Cuomo again did not put any money into the budget for NYCHA, showing once again that NYCHA does not matter.
Sanchez also points out that social distancing is often not possible in NYCHA housing.
We're facing an economic crisis. We're facing food insecurity and, quite frankly, a health disaster when we're told that we have to social distance and our elevators are out and you see people cramming in without PPE.
To get involved, call your congressperson and urge them to sign in support of the bill to cancel rent and mortgage payments nationwide. You can also call on Governor Cuomo to cancel rent by clicking the link below.
This pandemic hits and the banks and the hedge funds are protected and they even get little sweetener deals. And then everyday working people and people trying to just make things, make it by are the ones that are feeling the brunt of this crisis.
Reporting for BronxNet, Francesca Feliz.
America has just experienced one of its most impactful presidential elections of our lifetimes. We revisit conversations with Michael Blake, he's the vice chair of the Democratic National Committee and New York Assemblyman, and with Rebecca C. Lewis, she's a political reporter for City and State New York Magazine, about how early voting and the usage of absentee ballots shaped the outcome of the election. Let's take a look.
What's at stake? I've been telling people a lot that by the time we get to election day, unfortunately, we'll be in a scenario where, about 200,000 plus Americans would have lost their lives because of COVID. And it's unacceptable. And so you wonder what's at stake. The funding for our local small and minority-owned businesses, the opportunities for you to go back to school with your kids. Think about how you're trying to figure out childcare, what's happening around housing. And so when we talk about what's going on with voting, yes, absentee voting and vote by mail is a critical element to make it easier. But we also want to say you will have early voting opportunities, everybody. And you have to be very mindful here in New York around the challenges that can happen around affidavit ballots. Please do not let someone tell you that you are not on the roll if you know that you are on the roll. Don't say that they can't find you in the system. Have them look and make sure they find you in the system. So many people had their opportunities blocked from them because of that. And so there are executive orders that are being rolled out. But also, Dr. Lee, in my role in the DNC, we're engaging with our voter protection teams so that everyone can be aware of what you need to do. And this is what I say to everyone. You really don't have an excuse. You have plenty of time to get registered. You can vote by mail. You can do early voting if you need to go day of and do it safely. But again, iwillvote.com is the site that we've created so you can figure out all the information, not just for you, but for your family members across the country. And just so you can understand, I tell people often, Dr. Lee, Election Day is not just November 3rd. Election Day is the first day a ballot gets to you. And the people down in North Carolina, their ballots started dropping last week. So we're in the move right now.
We're in it right now. We're in it right now.
And I think the best way to frame this is, our forefathers, our foremothers, our ancestors, they endured much more to have a chance to vote. I'm sure you can walk outside with a mask to go vote in 2020.
Absolutely. So that's what's happening in the world of politics. So you've been covering these things, these long lines. What have you seen so far?
The long lines have been both encouraging and to a degree discouraging. You never like to see long lines. I've not heard, that's not true. I've heard very little complaints. People are very excited. They're willing to wait online. But it's still troubling to see that at places in the city that people are waiting 3, 4, sometimes even 5 hours, and really speaks to both the enthusiasm and excitement that people have about voting, but also to a degree the lack of preparedness by the City Board of Elections to know exactly how many people they should have been expecting and to allocate poll sites accordingly.
Some people pull a red flag about voter suppression, but I see that there's an overwhelming enthusiastic feeling about getting out to exercise your right to vote.
It is true that any time that someone who is trying to vote has difficulty, it is in some ways a form of suppression, but it's still true. It's easier than ever to vote in New York City this year. Absentee ballots are expanded. That's never happened before. This is our first presidential election with early voting. It's to be expected to a degree that there might be some kinks, and this just turned out to be an incredibly high profile, contentious election that people want to get involved in, and of course election day itself.
What might you think the mail-in votes and early voting, how would that impact our election? What do you think about that?
It's so hard to tell right now. We obviously saw a lot of mail-in ballots for the primary and in New York City that really delayed getting results back. I think that the Board of Elections, I think, has learned from the primary, and they've been preparing to be able to count those ballots faster. But both are so new. It's impossible to know about, exactly what kind of impact that'll have on turnout. We don't know yet if all the absentee ballots and early voting is going to mean that no one's going to show up on election day. I don't expect that to happen, but it's totally unprecedented. I think that a lot of people, a lot of observers, a lot of election rights advocates are seeing this as potentially record turnout now that there are 3 ways to vote. With a degree of certainty that Biden will win New York. So I don't think that much is in question. It's so hard to tell. I think that there's record turnout, and high turnout has traditionally helped Democrats. But we don't know yet. We don't know if the turnout is, conservative Republican voters or first-time independent voters who might be trying to back Trump. It's so hard to tell. Everyone thought they knew what was going to happen in 2016. So I'm not gonna make any hard and fast predictions.
Yeah, I know. Everybody was like, and then when it happened, so you're already looking forward to 2021. Tell us what you're working on.
I am working on the 21 and 21 campaign to get 21 women elected to the city council in 2021. Right now there are 12 women, which is 12 out of 51, pretty low percentage considering that women make up more than half of the city's population. And, they've recently rolled out endorsements, 32 Democrats, 33 total, 1 Republican. And actually the first major organization to do ranked choice endorsements. They've got first, second, third choices. It's very exciting. Ranked choice voting is the big unknown for 2021. I've been covering it since the Charter Revision Commission. And it's going to make it a very exciting election. And I certainly hope that the enthusiasm that we're seeing for this election carries over to the municipal elections next year.
Yeah, that's what we keep telling people. Make sure you exercise your right to vote, whether it's local or national or state or national or whatever. Exercise your right to vote. We'll take a break right here, but coming up next, Bobby C. He has it all for you. He has the highlights of the most impactful moments in the world of sports. Stay tuned.
When taking public transportation, don't touch your phone. Carry hand sanitizer and use it immediately upon leaving the bus or train. Avoid touching your face. If someone is coughing or sneezing, move away. Wash your hands with soap and water as soon as possible. Limit contact with poles. If possible, avoid rush hour. Don't eat or drink on public transportation. Keep your bag off the floor or other surfaces. Avoid directly touching turnstiles. Stay up to date with the latest from your local health department and CDC.
Small businesses continue to be really the biggest employers of our economy, not the big corporation, not the big box stores, but the small mom and pop stores in every block, every neighborhood. Being shut down for 3, 4, maybe even 5 months, and then being saddled with a debt is not the best scenario for a small business. And that's why I put that bill in, that it will be able to provide grants to allow them to get back on their feet. Even though there is a moratorium on rent in New York State, still rent continues to be the biggest operating cost of any business. If you don't pay rent for 90 days, 3 months, at the end of the day, you're going to have to come up with the money.
We usually spend this New Year segment highlighting the best of sports, but 2020 has certainly changed some of that narrative. Not just in sports, but life too. So many headlines, some good, some okay, some bad, some horrific. With that said, we've decided to share the best of 2020 through 4 interviews. Our first, racing legend Mario Andretti. In late May, when the Indy 500 was supposed to be on full display, Mario highlights how motor racing helped the world turn the corner in the fight against COVID-19.
I always tell people that I love racing, Mario, not just because of the racing, but the actual, sport being at the front of innovation. And I was really happy to see that you see someone like Ferrari making ventilators for the pandemic, even Ford here in America making ventilators and PPE. As someone that's a dual citizenship, you must be very excited about watching both countries contribute and having racing being out in the forefront in the helping efforts.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, excited and very proud, that they put aside, their main specialty and their careers and just dove in there, to help, as you say, the rest of the world in need of ventilators, which at the moment everybody was sort of, we need some pronto. It's not something that you can just snap your finger and build. So it was it's a complicated piece of equipment, and the engineering factor capabilities, Ferrari and I think Red Bull did something like that, Mercedes. I mean, my heart, it's wonderful to see that. Kudos to all of them. And Ford, GM, they all did their part. I mean, the auto industry participated in a wonderful way. And again, we're part of the auto industry, and we're very proud of that.
Our next interview spotlights a Globetrotter with local roots here in New York. We sat down with Harlem Globetrotter Max Pierce in June to discuss how racism has affected the young Hooper's career and how he has dedicated himself to promoting change through basketball.
Max, I would love to get your perspective too, because as a young black star in the world today, I think the question, especially from those that are trying to kind of get involved with the conversation and the dialogue, is what is it like to be a young African-American male? And what does someone have to do that might not understand the conversation in order to affect change?
Yeah, first of all, I really appreciate this question. I guess the first step for true change is for white people to just be open-minded and listen with the intent of understanding. I think a lot of the times there are good-hearted people out there that want to listen, but the second that they hear the term white privilege, they lock up and get defensive because they associate white privilege with having bad moral character, and that's not the case. White privilege just comes from being born as a white person in America, and you're reaping the benefits of the systematically biased structure that we have. And so if people could take the time to understand that and understand how it affects Black people, then I think it would allow us to get into the minds of people who are not as coherent and educated on what is going on right now. So I mean, there's so many layers to it, and it can be really difficult to unpack. But for starters, self-education is what needs to happen, for Black people and for white people. I went live on my Instagram about 3.5 weeks ago, and I was called the N-word like 20 times in a row, and I just had to act like I didn't see it and just remove that person from the live while continuing to speak about what I wanted to speak about. And then, just scrolling on Twitter, I see videos of altercations between a Black person and a white person, and the white person gets so upset that they feel like the only way that they can take a deep dig or a deep stab at that Black person is to use that ultimate triggering word, which is the N-word. And it just shows your true colors. So it's very difficult to deal with.
ESPN national baseball writer Marly Rivera echoed similar stories of struggle as a rising female journalist in a business that is still predominantly a man's world. In late September, Rivera spoke passionately about the struggles of being a woman and a woman of color.
I as you know, Bobby, I used to be on the Yankees beat, and then I became a national writer, and I sort of have a hybrid position now, kind of doing both. And it's been a true challenge. And what happens is that I thought that when I started 20 years ago, that you and I would have this conversation today and think that it had gotten better. And the problem is that it hasn't. We've had to adapt in a different, it doesn't mean acceptance is very different from being allowed to do something, right? The reason what Claire Smith and all these pioneering women, dealt with at one point was the fact they couldn't even come into the clubhouse, right? They were denied access to their place of work. Right now, we have plenty of access. The problem is the acceptance, right? We've seen it recently out there, with the vitriol and the comments again against women in sports. And it's a very difficult thing to do. And it's particularly difficult as a woman of color. We have a joke that we have all the strikes against us, right? It's like, it's every one of them, because you're not only a woman, you're a woman of color. And then you are, in a sport that is the biggest boys club, that exists in many ways. Some people say it's the NFL. I can guarantee you that it's not. I've covered them both. And Major League Baseball is a lot tighter in terms of welcoming, right, those voices in there. As we know, this year is the first time that we ever have a full-time coach in Alyssa Nacken with the San Francisco Giants. And there's still, to this day, even though there's plenty of qualified women, and we have played baseball for more than a century, there isn't a single woman who has been a general manager or assistant general manager of a team in baseball. So, we have a lot of places to go, and we still have a lot of ground to cover. And unfortunately, we have retroceded, and everything that we've seen with everything out there, it's getting worse. And I really didn't expect that to happen. So it's been a very difficult time to be on social media and have to handle quite a bit of the vitriol and the things that they say out there against women in sport.
New York Times bestselling author Jeff Pearlman put 2020 into perspective for us. The acclaimed sports writer and New York native himself just penned a book about Kobe Bryant and the last Lakers dynasty with Kobe at the helm. We sat down with Jeff in early October to speak about the loss of Kobe and how it seemed to start the spiral of 2020.
What was your first reaction to the passing of Kobe Bryant? I mean, I know for me, sometimes even thinking about it now, still a sense of shock that he's gone.
Sad, real profound sadness. Same as you. I still, sometimes when I do these interviews, I accidentally slip into present tense. I mean, it sucks. My first reaction wasn't, his last game when he scored, it was this guy died with his daughter. This guy died in a helicopter crash with his daughter, who's 13 years old, same age my kid is. Like, that is devastating. That is still devastating. And his remaining 3 daughters are going to be haunted by that for the rest of their lives. His widow obviously is going to be haunted by that for the rest of their lives. I know he meant a lot to a lot of people as a basketball player and as an icon. But to me, like, this idea that he died on a helicopter crash with his daughter is so haunting and so tragic and so sad. That's really what I felt at the time and still sticks with me.
We've come full circle. The LA Lakers won it for Kobe and Gigi. We managed to see a World Series champ and a Stanley Cup final too. Up next is a Buffalo Bills playoff game with a New York piloted testing plan that could reopen large-scale events to fans like Broadway and the Super Bowl, and plenty of more vaccinations as hopefully we get closer to halting COVID-19 for good. That will allow us to get back to the games and the life we love. Here's to all sports, near and far, from our homes to yours. All the best from the BronxNet boys, CP and Bobby C. Happy 20...
When taking public transportation, don't touch your phone. Carry hand sanitizer and use it immediately upon leaving the bus or train. Avoid touching your face. If someone is coughing or sneezing, move away. Wash your hands with soap and water as soon as possible. Limit contact with poles. If possible, avoid rush hour. Don't eat or drink on public transportation. Keep your bag off the floor or other surfaces. Avoid directly touching turnstiles. Stay up to date with the latest from your local health department and CDC.
Welcome back, everyone. You know, this year, our medical health professionals' resolves were tested like never before with the spread of COVID-19. We spoke to the founder and registered nurse, Kristen Hansen, and organizer, Angelina Proia, of Adopt a Nurse. And we're going to take a look back at how they aided their fellow frontline workers during the peak of the pandemic. First of all, you came up with this during this time, during this pandemic. Tell us how it all got started.
So I'm a fairly new nurse. I started working at my current hospital in January and had actually finished my orientation right around the time where coronavirus had hit New York really hard. So I spent a lot of time, on my drives home, very nervous, very anxious for what it meant for me as a nurse, what it meant for my family, my patients. And I spent a lot of time wasting my energy in a negative way. And I was trying to think of a way to have a positive impact on my fellow nurses and how I could somehow help and involve the community. And the idea kind of just came to me. I was staying up for another night shift. It was like 4 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, what if I made like an Adopt a Nurse program where people in the community could get involved by adopted nurses? That way, for the people who feel helpless at home who want to help, there's something that they could do that's safe. And the nurses who are on the front lines, who are exhausted, stressed to the max, and feeling very alone and sad, like this would be a fantastic way to support them. So I put some feelers out on some Facebook groups that were local to me, and the response was overwhelming. People were super excited to get involved. And so it started out with just a Suffolk chapter. We were matching some nurses in Nassau, and the numbers kept growing and growing. And Angelina actually had reached out to me and wanted to run our now Nassau chapter.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, how did you meet up with Angelina?
I think someone shared something with me on Facebook, and my father had recently passed away from COVID. He passed away on April 16th at 66. I felt very helpless. I felt like I'm not a nurse. I can't be on the front lines fighting this. So I saw something shared on Facebook, and I knew that this was my way of fighting COVID. Because the last person to be with my father and hold his hand was a nurse. The person who held up the phone so I could say goodbye to him while he was unconscious on an incubator was a nurse. And I just wanted to let them know that COVID families stand with them, and we want them to keep fighting for other people's loved ones. And I thought that this was a really good opportunity to fight while being on the sidelines. And I had to do something to honor my father. And that's kind of how it came about. I don't know who shared it with me, but I just saw it and I knew that I had to do something with it. So
how old was your father, Angelina?
My father was 66.
Very athletic, in shape?
He was running marathons. As recently as 5 years ago. He was, not a smoker. COVID doesn't care. It will kill you. And I think that's what people need to realize. And I just want to help all the nurses who are dealing with all the death that they're seeing, including my dad, and let them know that we're with them and we want them to keep fighting.
All right. Right on there. Sorry for your loss, by the way. Yeah. Kristen, I see you'll have a lot on your back wall there. Can you explain some of those?
So this is my wall of inspiration, my wall of gratitude. I change it on the daily. But these are all letters and cards and pictures from people who have been involved in this program, who have surprised me and sent me these beautiful, beautiful cards. There's one family who sends me a postcard every week with my face on it, oddly enough, and it's pertinent to whatever's happening either in the world or in the Facebook group. And I, like everyone, I have hard days, especially after I tend to try to cluster my night shifts together. So, after 4 or 5 exhausting nights, you come home and you're just an empty shell. There's really not much left of you. So, you know, I get to come home and I see this. It's right between my bedroom is right there and my bathroom is right there. So I see this constantly. And so it reminds me to keep going and fight the good fight.
Right.
And, you know, when you're just feeling down, like it takes 2 seconds to just see, like, this one right here is from a 7-year-old girl named Charlotte.
Oh, says hi.
It makes me
I love
smile.
you.
And, you know, they're little reminders to just keep pushing on.
Yeah.
And I think that's super important, because in times like these, when, I mean, we feel helpless too. There's only so much that we can actually do. And, you know, you do absolutely everything that you can to fight for these patients, but sometimes it's just not enough.
Kristen, how does your hardest day look? I mean, you see all. You see people trying to breathe and try to stay alive.
So I'm someone who feels things very, very deeply. I'm not an emotional person in the sense where I cry a lot or anything like that. But since COVID has really hit us, I've been crying more in the last 2 months than I have in the last 5 years.
Yeah. What stands out in your mind that just makes you go into that?
So for me, I think that the most important part when I am going into these COVID patient rooms is that I make sure that they still feel like they're human beings. There was one instance in particular that broke my heart. And it seems so trivial, and it should be something that's trivial.
Yeah.
But it ended up being a massively important moment in this woman's stay with us. I went into this room around 5 o'clock in the morning. I was drawing my morning labs and giving her medications and just, you know, talking to her. Super sweet lady. She was in her early 40s. She was on a non-rebreather mask. And she was doing okay. So we're chatting, and I just noticed that her hair was a bit greasy. So I said to her, I was like, do you want me to wash your hair?
Oh.
I know you're super busy. I don't want to take any extra time of yours. And I said, no, I have the time, and I would like to do this if you would let me. And so I yelled outside and asked someone to grab me one of the warm shampoo caps. And I came in and I washed her hair, and I let it sit there while I was drawing her labs. We're talking, joking. And then I sat there and I combed her hair out. And she started tearing up. And she's like, you're the first person who has treated me like a human being in the 90s.
Oh, yeah.
And that, for me, was just like, that makes me so sad that something so small meant so much, when this is something that should be a small thing. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yes.
So, I mean, it's little moments like that stick with you. So I make sure that I do any and everything that I can to make these people feel human. I had a patient a week ago who he wanted to show me a YouTube video, and he's like, it's so funny. This is how I feel right now. And a lot of people would just run out of the room because, oh my God, we're breathing COVID air. And maybe it's maybe I'm just young and naive, but, or maybe it's because I care, but you know, I'm going to stay there and I'm going to talk to you and I'm going to watch the video, and we're going to have, I'm going to do my very best to foster a good, caring relationship with you.
God bless you, and thank you for being you. Angelina.
Yes, sir.
Do you think we should continue this far beyond the pandemic? Because our frontline people, our first responders, should be recognized all the time for the work that they do.
I will tell you that I never realized how much work nurses do, how much they give their patients, and how much sadness they can see that they're exposed to. And I think COVID's really brought that to a heightened level. Will I continue this after COVID? Well, yes. I don't know that COVID's going to end anytime soon, but when it does, there will be something new, and there's still going to be more to give nurses. They're still going to have another battle. So absolutely, I'll be a part of it in honor of my father. You know, that's something that I would like to be a part of, because nurses are fighting things at their own peril. As I said, a nurse held the phone up to my father so that we could say goodbye. And, you know, my father was very active in a highly infectious COVID-19, you know, infection. I mean, he had a very active, deadly infection, and he someone held the phone up to his ear so that I could say goodbye. The last words, that I could say I love you to my dad.
Yeah. Well, thank you for all that you're doing, Angelina Proia, and God bless you, and stay safe, and continue on with this program far beyond COVID-19. Kristen Hansen, thank you for your service, and God bless you also. And thanks for joining us on BronxNet, okay?
Thank you, Bob.
Stay safe. We love you guys. Thank you for your service. Thank you for everything that you guys are doing, because, yes, people, if they have to go, if they're going to die, you want them to die with love and dignity. And, yeah, and with people, if you can't get people, your loved ones around you, at least have that compassionate nurse that's going to be there, and for the last days or for the last minute. Thank you, guys.
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you.
I want to thank you, and we appreciate you for letting us share in this space and time with you. And remember, have a happy, healthy, and safe, prosperous new year. And remember the 3 W's. Wear that mask, wash those hands, and watch your distance. WWW, you can put a dot or all that stuff on it. But remember, wear that mask, wash your hands, and watch that distance. For all of us here at BronxNet, have a great and enjoyable day. And always remember this: what you are is God's gift to you, and what you make of yourself is your gift to God. So choose your choice. Let your choice control the chooser. Remember that this is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Catch you another day, another way. Love you all. See you on BLS. Peace.